I arrived at my granddaughter's art showcase. But my son said, "Don't confuse the crowd." So I left. I made the frame with my own hands. Maple wood sanded down until the grain felt like silk, the edges gently rounded, and the corners joined with dovetail cuts. No nails, no shortcuts. I even carved a small cross in the back, the way my late husband used to do. Not for display, but for blessing. You'd think at 74 with arthritis that acts up every time it rains, I'd stop fiddling with tools and glue. But that week, I couldn't help it. My granddaughter Tessa had her senior art showcase, and she'd emailed me an image of the piece she was most proud of, a swirling watercolor of the sky at dusk, titled, "Before the Light Goes." I read that title 3 times. Then printed it out and pinned it on my fridge. Something about it. You ever feel like someone put your whole soul into 3 words and didn't even know they did? So I built a frame. For her. For the painting. For all the years she'd spent in my house when her mama passed. I remember when she was little drawing with chalk on the porch, her fingers always covered in blue. I told her back then, if the world doesn't give you space, make your own. Funny how I forgot to say that to myself. The day of the showcase, I wore my church jacket. Not because it was fancy, but because it still smelled like Easter lilies and old pews. It made me feel anchored. The weather had just turned a late April chill that seeps into your bones, and I had packed the frame in a cloth-lined crate in the back seat of the car. The gallery was in a clean white building in Chicago. Sleek, modern high ceilings and big glass windows. No signs outside, just minimalism. You know the kind of places that look expensive even before you walk in. I stepped out of the car and double-checked the address. My son, Eric, had sent it by text with a curt, "Starts at 6. Don't be late." I was early. Always have been. As I walked toward the entrance, holding the crate close to my chest, like a gift from another world, I saw Eric already standing outside, adjusting his shirt cuffs like he was posing for a lifestyle magazine. "Mom," he said, not warmly, not rudely, just neutral. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. I made something for Tessa's piece. A frame. Thought she might want it. He didn't look at the crate. Didn't ask what it was made of or how long it took. Just glanced over his shoulder at the doorway like he didn't want to be seen standing still. Then came the sentence. The one that still rings in my ear even now, even after everything that came after. "Can we just keep things simple tonight, Mom? We don't want to confuse the crowd." I stood there, still holding the frame. "Confuse?" I asked. He sighed as if I'd missed the obvious. "It's an elite program. There are donors, critics, media. Everyone's worked really hard to get here. Delia's parents are already inside. I just don't want things getting well sentimental." That word, sentimental, like it was an infection, like it might cling to the walls and mess up the lighting. I looked him in the eyes, or tried to. He wouldn't meet them, just kept smoothing the front of his shirt like he was dusting off invisible blame. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because what was there to say? How do you explain to your own child that you didn't come to be seen but to see? That you didn't dress up to be admired, but to witness someone you love doing something you always believed they could? "I thought Tessa might want me here," I said finally. He shook his head gently. "Of course she does. But let's not make this about history. She's made a name for herself now. People see her as modern ambitious, Let's keep it professional. I know some of you reading this right now are thinking, I would have gone in anyway. I would have marched right past him, and maybe you would have. But some hurts don't make you loud. They make you still. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because my heart had gone quiet. And when the heart goes quiet, the body just follows. I turned, walked back to the car, frame still in hand. Didn't look back. The motel room smelled like old citrus and laminate floors. I hadn't planned to stay the night, but I'd booked it anyway. Just in case. That's something I've always done, make room for the unexpected even when no one else does. I sat on the edge of the bed, the frame still resting in my lap. My hands were stiff from the drive and the cold, but I kept tracing the smooth edge of the maple. The grain felt like memory. You ever hold something you made with love and suddenly feel foolish for it? That's how it felt. Not because the work wasn't good, it was. The corners lined up just right. The wax finish brought out the warmth of the wood. No, it felt foolish because I'd made it thinking it would matter. Not in a grand way. I didn't expect applause. Just a smile. A thank you. The kind of moment that tells you you're still part of the story. Instead, I'd been told I might confuse people. I remember sitting there and whispering aloud, Lord, am I really that out of place now? And then I sat in the silence. Not for answers, just for stillness. That's the part they don't tell you about growing older. The world doesn't slam the door on you all at once. It just starts leaving you out of the invitations. Quietly. Painlessly almost. Like they're doing you a favor. I thought about calling Tessa. I stared at my phone for 10 minutes, thumb hovering over her name. But what was I supposed to say, sweetheart? I got turned away by your father. I hope you enjoy your moment anyway. I didn't want to color her joy with my pain. So instead, I set the frame down gently on the table near the window. Then I changed clothes, folded the dress shirt I'd ironed the night before, and pulled on my soft wool cardigan. The one with the small hole in the sleeve right where I rest my elbow. Comfort over presentation. That felt right. I walked over to the vending machine just outside my door. Got a Diet Pepsi and a small bag of trail mix even though I wasn't hungry. Sat back on the bed and turned on the TV. Nothing stuck. The channels just flickered one after the other. Cooking shows, crime dramas, commercials with families that looked like they had it all together. I turned it off. The quiet returned. My husband, Emmett, used to say that silence was the only sound that told the truth. And the truth was, I had let myself be erased so slowly that I barely noticed. I thought about all the times I said yes. Yes to babysitting. Yes to wiring money for just this once. Yes to being picked up later. Yes to not being in the family Christmas card because the photographer already had a vision. So many small yeses that made me feel useful, needed, included, until they didn't. Maybe that's what it was really about, not the art showcase, not the frame, not even the crowd. Maybe it was the realization that I'd spent years being available, hoping that would be enough to stay visible. But availability isn't visibility. And love, real love, isn't supposed to need staging instructions. I stared at the frame across the room, propped against the wall now. You looked beautiful, I thought, even if no one would see you tonight. And maybe I whispered to the Lord again. Maybe someone else needs a frame like that. I didn't sleep much, but I rested. You know the difference, don't you? Sleep is what the body does. Rest is what the soul asks for when it's tired of pretending. I woke before dawn, just as the sky began to blush behind the city skyline. I poured myself the motel's complimentary coffee, weak but warm, sat by the window, and watched the light creep across the frame. It hit the carved cross first, just a sliver of sunlight brushing over that small mark only I knew was there. And for a moment, just one, I felt peace. Not the kind that fixes everything, but the kind that says, you're not broken. You're just waking up. I drove back to Vermont the next morning. 6 hours of highway broken only by a gas station stop near Albany and a quiet lunch at a diner where nobody asked me anything but coffee hon. I said yes. Twice. The silence in my car felt thicker than the road noise. I didn't play music. I didn't turn on the news. I just drove. Let my mind spool itself out like an old cassette tape, clicking back through scenes I hadn't meant to revisit. The house was just as I left it. White vinyl siding a patchy lawn and a mailbox that creaks no matter how much oil I give it. I backed into the driveway and sat for a moment before cutting the engine. I had no one to greet. No dog anymore. No neighbor waiting on the porch. Just me. And the kitchen light I'd left on like a lighthouse in case I got lost. You ever walk into your own house and feel like a guest? I dropped the keys into the bowl by the door, kicked off my shoes, and slipped on the old fleece slippers I keep by the coat rack. One of them has a tear on the inside lining. Been meaning to sew it for 6 months now. I reheated the coffee from that morning. Didn't even bother changing the filter. Bitter but warm. That seems to be the theme these days. In the corner of the kitchen is a small bulletin board. I keep appointment reminders there. A flyer for the church rummage sale. A recipe card Tessa wrote in 4th grade for chocolate happiness squares, complete with a smiley face and a misspelled vanilla. I stared at that card for a long while. My fingers itched to call her, to ask how the showcase went, to ask if she noticed I wasn't there. But something stopped me. Pride, maybe. Or the quiet knowledge that if she hadn't called already, maybe she didn't even know. And that hurt more than I wanted to admit. So instead, I did what old women do. I started tidying. Not for anyone. Just to feel order in a world that had gotten out of balance. Wiped the counter, rinsed a mug, fed the sourdough starter I keep in an old mason jar. It still smells like yeast and faith. Then I sat, in my chair, by the window. The one Emmett used to sit in before his knees gave out. The trees were bare, still just the faintest green starting to show. Spring comes late here. Reluctant like it's not sure it'll be welcomed back. I reached for my notebook, the spiral-bound one with the cover half torn, and started a grocery list. Bananas, peanut butter, paper towels, maybe canned soup. Something easy for tired nights. You start writing lists like that after 70. Not because you forget, but because it helps you remember what you still need. I glance toward the hallway where the closet holds photo albums. No one asks to look through anymore. Tessa's baby picture is on the cover of one of them, her tiny fists balled up her head, still misshapen from birth. Her mama, my daughter Jenny, had passed just weeks after that photo. Stroke. 39 years old. Left a baby and a room full of dreams behind. I raised Tessa after that. Not out of obligation, out of instinct. She used to call me Mama Ree, a blend of Mama and Lorraine. I didn't correct her. I wore that name like a second skin. I remember packing her lunch every morning for kindergarten. She liked turkey with too much mustard. I'd draw a little heart on her napkin. She always showed it to the teachers. And I remember her 7th birthday. She wanted to paint her own cake. I baked a sheet cake and gave her colored frosting like it was an art kit. She painted a tree with blue leaves, said it was what home felt like. Now she's in Chicago, surrounded by track lighting and sleek people in sleek shoes. And I make coffee twice with the same grounds. I'm not bitter. Not really. Just trying to find where I fit, now that no one needs me to pack lunches or draw hearts on napkins. That night, I turned the news on low. They were talking about the stock market, about rising prescription costs, about a shortage of home health workers, then a segment about an elementary school art program that got defunded. Kids holding signs let us draw. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, whispered again, Lord, if there's a reason I'm still here, I hope it's more than folding laundry. But maybe that was ungrateful. I know better. I've had good years. Not all of them, but enough. I've eaten warm bread fresh from my own oven. I've held a child's hand through grief. I've sat in pews where the hymns cracked open my chest and let grace rush in. But still I wonder, what happens to all the love we carry when no one wants it anymore? The next morning, I woke with the kind of heaviness you don't shake off. Not grief exactly, more like sediment. Layers of things unspoken settled into the chest. I moved slow, poured hot water over the same tea bag I'd used yesterday, sat down at the kitchen table with a faded yellow pad and wrote the date in the corner. Then I stared at the blank space below it. Eventually, I wrote one line, things I've given without asking anything back. I didn't know why I started that list, but once I did, it just kept coming. $6 200 first installment of Eric and Delia's down payment 2013, $280-month preschool tuition for Tessa, ages 3, 5, $19,000 private school tuition. When Eric said, public school wasn't rigorous enough, $1 400 new brakes for their Lexus SUV. The one Delia said was too classy for the dealership mechanic, $50 here, $100 there, just until next payday. And the big one, $35,000, the bridge loan for Eric's business expansion that never actually expanded. There was more, I'm sure, but those were the ones with paper trails. I went to the hallway closet, pulled out the old accordion folder where I keep my someday papers. Wills, insurance, receipts, letters I never sent. I sat on the living room floor and began sorting. One folder labeled Eric bulged at the sides. I'd written it in all caps back when I still thought organizing meant I had some control. Inside were check stubs' birthday cards never mailed and a Mother's Day letter he wrote in 10th grade. Thanks for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. I held that one longer than the rest. The ink was smudged near the bottom, like he'd cried writing it, or maybe the paper just got wet sometime in the last 30 years. I flipped to a more recent section, a typed invoice from when I ordered catering for his 40th birthday. $872. I paid it in full. Delia had asked me to keep the receipt quiet. We want people to think we handled it, she said, with that polite, icy voice she uses when she wants something to disappear. It did disappear. Me, mostly. I'm not naive. I know this happens in more families than folks like to admit. You help and help and help, and then one day, they treat your presence like an inconvenience. Like you're too much in the room, too sentimental, too attached to old ways. Well, the old ways built the lives they live in now. It was my hands that held things together when Jenny passed. My back that bent over their laundry when they brought it home during college breaks. My fridge that fed them when their pantry was empty. I don't say that to be bitter. Truly, I don't. I say it because it's true. And truth has a funny way of staying quiet until it's finally written down. I stacked the papers in neat piles. The air smelled like dust and old ink. I set aside everything with Eric's name on it. Put it in a folder labeled Review. I'd review it later, sure. But even labeling it felt like something had shifted. Like I was no longer just supporting cast in their story, but a woman with her own script. Around noon, I heard the mail truck, the clink of the box. I walked outside, and the wind smelled like thawing earth mud bark and the sharp tang of leftover snow, spring trying its best. There were 2 envelopes, one from the electric company, one from the dental clinic, both bills. Neither addressed me as Ms. Duval, just current resident. Even the mail had forgotten who I was. I stood by the mailbox a moment longer than I needed, staring down the street. It was quiet. Kids at school, neighbors at work, and me. I was home, invisible, steady, and tired of asking for a place I'd already earned. I took the long way back to the porch, let the steps creak under me like they needed to say something too. Sat on the swing and looked out at the road where Emmett used to park his truck. He was a quiet man, but he never let me feel small. Not once. He called me low, like I was still the girl he met at the lumber yard in '71. I thought about how he'd handle all this. Probably say, "You already know what to do. You just haven't done it yet." That night, I didn't watch TV. Didn't read. I just sat with the stack of papers in front of me and a cup of chamomile tea cooling in my hands. And I whispered, "I see it now, Lord. I see how much I've disappeared. I'm ready to come back into view." The next morning, I put on my walking shoes, the old gray ones with the worn soles and the little squeak in the left heel, and headed to the bank. It wasn't a dramatic decision. No grand declaration. Just one of those things that needed doing, like sweeping the porch or refilling the bird feeder. There's a kind of clarity that comes after enough silence. Not angry clarity, just settled. The bank teller recognized me right away. "Mrs. Duval," she said with a smile. "We haven't seen you in a while." "Been keeping to myself," I answered. "But I need to speak to someone about my accounts. Someone who can help me look at co-signatures and standing authorizations." She nodded and buzzed someone from the back. A younger man in a navy tie came out clean cut. Polite, the kind of man who still holds doors and says, "Ma'am," without irony. His name was Brett. He led me into a small office with glass walls and offered me water. I declined. I opened my folder, laid it gently on the desk. "I'd like to revoke 2 things," I said. The standing authorization on the car lease tied to Eric Duval and the educational loan I co-signed under his wife's name. Both were set up under the assumption of repayment. There's been no repayment. He blinked, then sat up straighter. "Of course. We can begin that process. Just so I understand, are you requesting full removal of your financial backing?" "I am." "And future disbursements?" "None." He nodded and typed quickly. I could see my reflection in the screen behind him, small, pale, still. But not weak. Not anymore. It took about 15 minutes to go through the steps. He was professional, efficient. He didn't ask for the reasons. I appreciated that. Some things don't need explaining. When he slid the confirmation paper across the desk, I read it carefully. then signed with my full name, Lorraine Elise Duval. The way I used to sign checks when the woodshop was still mine. Before I sold the business. Before I let myself become Grandma Mom, or could you just... Brett stood up to walk me out. If you need anything else, I will, I said gently. Not today, but soon. He smiled. Held the door. Back in the car, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindicated. What I felt, if I'm being honest, was like I'd just swept the floor of a room no one else would see. But it was my room. That mattered. That afternoon, I stopped by the co-op market near the green. I don't usually shop there. Prices are higher and the labels have too many syllables, but I walked in anyway. I bought oranges, the kind that peel easy and drip down your fingers. I picked up a wedge of real cheese from Vermont cows, not the processed slices I usually settle for. A loaf of crusty bread, lavender hand cream, and flowers. Just a small bunch yellow tulips not yet opened. No one was coming over. I wasn't hosting dinner. But I wanted beauty in the house. For me. That was new. Back home, I trimmed the tulips and placed them in a jar on the table next to the faded church calendar and the salt shaker shaped like a chicken. It made the whole room softer, lighter. After putting the groceries away, I pulled out a chair in front of the old mirror by the coat stand. Looked at myself for a long time. The lines were deeper than I remembered. The gray had claimed more than half my hair now. But there was something else, too. Something steadier in the way I held my shoulders. I brushed my hair not to impress anyone, just because it felt good. Rubbed a bit of that lavender cream into my palms and let the scent bloom. Then I did something I hadn't done in over 2 years. I called Malik. You probably don't know him unless you ever wandered into our old wood shop in the late 90s. He was 15 then, wide-eyed, and always drawing in the margins of his math homework. His mama worked nights at the diner. I gave him odd jobs after school, sweeping sawdust, organizing screws, staining little scraps of maple. But mostly, he watched. He learned with those kind of eyes that drink in shape and movement. Now he runs a small gallery in Montpellier. I saw a feature on him once in the local paper. I cut it out and tucked it between the pages of my Bible right near Proverbs. He picked up on the second ring. Miss Lorraine? He said, voice warm with surprise. You okay? I smiled. I'm all right, sugar. Just wondering if you've got time for an old woman and a frame with nowhere to go. There was a pause. Then always. We met the next morning. The gallery was in a converted carriage house. Brick walls, high ceilings, light everywhere. He hugged me like someone who remembered where he came from. Like someone who'd known loss. I brought the frame in a canvas bag. Unwrapped it slowly. Let him run his fingers along the joints. This is beautiful, he said, reverent. It was meant for someone else, I said. But I think maybe it was meant for someone else after all. He nodded. I have a young artist, just 18. Works with charcoal and found paper. Doesn't have a dime, but she's got soul. Her piece isn't framed yet. Then give her this one, I said. He looked up. You sure? I nodded. I think we both know when something fits. We sat in the quiet for a while after that. Sunlight drifted through the tall windows, catching dust in the air, like gold flecks in water. Can I ask, Malik? Said gently. What brought you here today? I smiled. Someone told me I didn't belong in the picture. So I decided to find another wall to hang something on. He didn't ask who. He didn't need to. Instead, he said, "That young artist, her name's Maribel. She's been saving bottle caps to make a collage, and she walks here 2 miles after her shift at the laundromat. I think she'll cry when she sees this." I exhaled. A soft, grateful sound. That night, I slept early. No TV, no phone scrolling. Just me under a quilt I made back in '92, with the window cracked open and the scent of tulips nearby. I was tired, but not the heavy kind, the good kind. The kind that comes after moving something heavy you didn't know you'd been carrying. The next day, I made an appointment with the podiatrist. Finally. And rescheduled the dental cleaning I'd pushed off twice. Then I stopped by the pharmacy and picked up a new shade of lipstick. Plum berry. Not for Sunday, not for a wedding. Just because I'd caught myself smiling again in the mirror. And I thought, why not dress for the company of your own spirit? I took a walk the next morning around the lake trail that curves behind the high school and down toward the fire station. The air smelled like pine needles and mud, and the birds were loud enough to drown out my thoughts for once. And for once, I let them. When I got home, I opened the roll-top desk in the den, the one that still smells like Emmett's pipe tobacco even though I haven't lit one in over a decade. Inside, tucked under the spare checkbook and a brittle birth certificate, was the folder marked Estate Draft. I'd meant to update it years ago, after Jenny passed, then again after my hip surgery, but life has a way of postponing the uncomfortable until it becomes unbearable. Well, I was done postponing. I made an appointment that afternoon with a local attorney, Ms. Pilar Morales, recommended by a woman from my church, Quilting Circle. She was sharp, warm, and had a way of explaining things that didn't make me feel like I was being talked down to. We met 2 days later over tea in her office. I wore my good sweater, the teal one with the pearl buttons. She looked over my existing documents, nodding thoughtfully. "You've done a lot for your family," she said gently. "It's okay to rethink what legacy means." I sat back in the chair. That's just it. I don't want to erase them. I just want to stop feeding something that doesn't grow. She didn't blink. "Then let's adjust the soil." And that's what we did. I restructured the trust, left 2 equal portions to Eric and Delia, no more, no less, just enough to cover a semester of college for each grandchild if they use it wisely. No direct access, no open-ended disbursements. If they want more, I said plainly, they'll have to show more. Pilar nodded. "I can draft that language. It'll hold. The rest would seed something new. We created a fund small at first, but meaningful. A private foundation to support emerging young artists from underrepresented communities in Vermont. Name I hesitated, then smiled. The Blue Tree Fund, I said. Named after a 7-year-old who once painted what home felt like. She tilted her head. That's beautiful. It was, I said. Still is. I walked out of that office lighter. Not because I'd taken anything away, but because I'd finally put things in place, the way a woman folds linens before guests arrive, the way a carpenter fits the last piece of trim, the way God closes a door that was never meant to stay open. And later that night, I wrote my first letter to Maribel, the young artist Malik had introduced me to. I told her about the gallery frame, about Malik's first job, about the blue leaf tree my granddaughter once painted, and how some art doesn't ask permission to be seen. Then I wrote one line I hadn't expected: "You don't know me yet, but I believe in what's already blooming in your hands." I signed it simply LED. 3 days later, I got a postcard in the mail, handwritten, no return address. Just a single line across the back, I saw your frame. It was perfect. T. I read it 3 times before I sat down. My hands trembled, but not from anger, from something else. Something slower, like spring thaw. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a phone call or a knock at my door. But it was something. And sometimes something is all the heart needs to stay open. I placed the card on the mantel next to a ceramic dove from my baptism class and the faded picture of Emmett holding baby Jenny. Then I went to my closet and pulled out the linen dress I used to wear to summer potlucks, navy blue, with tiny buttons and a waist that still remembered my shape. Because I had somewhere to be. Malik had invited me to a small Friday night showcase. Nothing fancy, just young local artists presenting their work, sharing stories, standing in the light. I want you to come, he said, not as a donor, as yourself. It took me a minute to believe him, but I went. The gallery smelled like fresh paint and orange peels. The lights were soft, the crowd quiet. Some brought folding chairs. Others leaned on walls. And in the corner near the second window hanging just above eye level was my frame. Only now it cradled a piece of Maribel's art, a charcoal sketch of a young girl holding a house in her hands. The roof was crooked, the windows open, but the girl's face. She was smiling. Not big, just enough. I stood there a long time, letting the hush of the room settle into my chest. A hush made not of absence, but of presence. People stopped by and asked who made the frame. Malik nodded in my direction, and one by one they came to shake my hand. No one asked if I had children. No one asked what I used to do. They just saw the work. And in that moment, I was no one's mother, no one's task. I was simply Lorraine. That night, I walked home through the cool air. My shoes clicked on the pavement like punctuation marks on the end of a long sentence. And when I got to my porch, I looked up at the night sky and whispered, "You see me, Lord. And now, I do too." It started with a knock. Not loud, not hurried, just the kind of knock that says I'm not sure if I'm welcome. But I came anyway. I was in the kitchen steeping a cup of lemon balm tea, barefoot. House still in morning light. I opened the door, and there she was. Tessa, in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, hair pulled back in a messy twist, eyes rimmed with something more than just makeup. She held a small canvas in her hands. Nothing fancy. Just a swirl of deep blues and soft pinks, like sky after a storm. "I made this," she said quietly. "It's not for school. I just painted it." I stepped back to let her in. No words, just space. She stood in the living room like it was both familiar and strange. Like she remembered playing with blocks on that carpet, but wasn't sure if she still belonged. "I didn't know you kept my postcard," she said. I smiled. It was the first thing in a while that felt like a beginning. She looked around, saw the tulips on the table, the frame catalog open next to my tea, the flyer for the next gallery night pinned to the fridge with a wooden magnet that said, "Bless this mess." "I've been thinking," she said, "about how things get passed down." She paused. "And about what we forget when we're trying too hard to prove something to the wrong people." I let the words sit there. I didn't try to rescue them. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said finally. "But I want to learn from someone who remembers why we create in the first place." I took her hand and placed it on the old roll-top desk. This desk has held grief taxes and birthday cards. It also holds the last drawing your mom made before she got sick. Did you know that? She shook her head, eyes wide. She sketched a pair of hands holding a seed, I said. Said she didn't know what kind of tree it'd grow into, but she hoped someone would water it. Tessa bit her lip. You think there's anything left in me to grow, she whispered. I reached over and brushed a bit of charcoal dust off her cheek. Honey, I said you're already growing. You just forgot to look. That Sunday, Tessa came with me to church. She wore one of Jenny's old cardigans, cream with pearl buttons, and sat quietly beside me in the third pew from the front. The same pew I'd sat in for over 20 years through baptisms and funerals and Sunday potlucks that ran too long. The pastor read from Ecclesiastes, the part that says, "There is a time to be silent and a time to speak." I don't know if Tessa caught the look I gave her just then, but I saw the faintest smile on her lips, the kind that says, I hear it too. After the service, she helped fold chairs in the basement and asked if we could come back next week. Sure, I said. They don't bite. Even if they do, she grinned. I think I've had worse. Later that afternoon, we cleared out the spare room together. She found the old easel her mom used to paint on still folded behind a stack of tax folders and forgotten lamps. You kept this. Some things I said, wait for the right hands to come back. That night, we made dinner together. Not for anyone's approval, not to impress. Just two women, one older one learning, stirring a pot of butternut squash soup while the kitchen filled with steam and cinnamon. And maybe that's what reclamation looks like. Not some loud return. Not fireworks. Just choosing to stay soft where life tried to harden you. That same week, I finalized the paperwork for the trust. I didn't revoke everything. I left Eric and Valerie a portion. Enough to be fair. Enough that if they ever ask, I can say, this was your part. The rest was mine to choose. The majority went to something else. A scholarship fund through the Community Center for First-Generation Students in Creative Fields. We named it the Jenny Duval Fund because my daughter painted with a quiet fire. And I want the world to know she was here. As for the house, I kept it, but I started using the rooms again. The porch became a meeting spot for tea and talk. The attic turned it into a little workshop for framing. And the garage, well, let's just say Malik and I are thinking about turning it into a weekend class for young artists. Last Thursday, we held a small open house. I baked lemon bars. Tessa made a chalkboard sign that said, "Create like you're not afraid to be seen." People came, not in droves, but enough. Enough to remind me I am not invisible. I am not an accessory to anyone else's joy. I am a whole story still being written. If you're listening and you're someone who's been made to feel small, if you've ever been told to wait outside or don't embarrass us or you're just the grandmother, hear me now. Your worth was never theirs to define, and your voice. It's never too late to let it sing. I used to believe I was just the frame. Now I know I was always part of the art. And this is only the beginning. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Your voice still matters, and your next chapter starts today.